What do you get when you combine retro Italian personality, dirt bike features, and the perfect amount of horsepower? Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled. It's 2022, and there are no fewer than 11 motorcycle models currently sold in the US that have the word Scrambler in their name. 11 and a half if you count the Royal Enfield Scram. Traditionally, a Scrambler would be a street bike with classic styling and some aptitude for dirt riding. But it seems like most manufacturers have kind of forgotten about that last part.
These days, the word Scrambler refers as much to a bike's aesthetics as it does to its capabilities. A high pipe and dual sport style fender are no longer reliable indicators that a motorcycle has any off-road competence.
The Scramblers with traits that are the most useful off-road, like bigger wheels, spokes, and long travel suspension, have become the exception instead of the rule. Even among Ducati's own Scrambler line, the Desert Sled is the only model that wears a 19-inch front wheel rather than a 17 or 18.
So does that mean this is one of the rare Scramblers that actually earns its name? Stick around and find out.
Man, that exhaust sounds sick. So we just picked up the Ducati Desert Sled from Dunn Lewis Motorcycle Club in Washington, D.C. They are a do-it-yourself motorcycle garage / gear and parts shop. The way it works is you can become a monthly member and book shop time to bring your bike in and work on it yourself with tools they provide. They're a real hub of the motorcycle community here in DC, and I'm excited to be a part of it now. This bike has been modified and customized a little bit. I'm not familiar enough with the original equipment to go into much detail on it, but what I can say is that this Leo Vinci exhaust was a great move. So the highway cruising performance of the Desert Sled is not what I was the most excited to test out, but here we are. We're in 6th gear doing 65, turning a little over 4,000 RPM. To be honest, that would get pretty old in a hurry if I had to sit on the highway all day on this bike. But fortunately, that is not where Ducati intend for you to use this. True to the Scrambler concept, the Desert Sled is meant to do a little bit of urban riding, a little bit of sporty riding, and a little bit of dirt riding, all in style. If I remember correctly, the horsepower figure on here is something like 75. Not exactly rip your arms off fast, but it's got power if you ask for it. So vvoltz warned me that if I spend too much time sitting in traffic or at stoplights, that this bike gets really, really hot, which makes perfect sense. It's an L-twin, so one of the cylinders is positioned at the rear out of the flow of air right underneath my legs. It's also not liquid cooled, it's air and oil cooled. And to cap it all off, there's that high pipe that runs just underneath my thigh. Now, the only other Ducati Scrambler I've ridden was a Scrambler 1100, and that was the hottest motorcycle I have ever ridden. It was like a 40-degree morning when I rode it, and I still had to fight the urge to leap from the bike to prevent myself from being burned. So we'll have to see how this compares. Being an 800 instead of an 1100 could be that it generates less heat. So apart from those 300 cc's, the most important difference between the Scrambler 1100 and this Scrambler Desert Sled is that this bike is actually meant to go off-road a little bit. The 1100, like most Scramblers, is a Scrambler only in name and in its style. Those bikes have 17-inch cast wheels, they have a short suspension travel. Yeah, you could put MT60s on them, but that's not fooling anybody. The sled, on the other hand, has spoked wheels with a 19-inch in the front and a pretty tall, squishy suspension. Combine that with the chunky rubber this thing is wearing, and you get one of the few scrambler motorcycles that's actually suitable for scrambling.
Before we leave the pavement, let's see if the Desert Sled enjoys being hurried along a bendy road.
As far as its road riding qualifications go, the Desert Sled has a couple of sporty touches. The inverted fork is one, rear monoshock, and while it is only a single disc front brake, it is a radially mounted Brembo monoblock.
The biggest thing working against this bike in sporty riding is the stock rubber, the Pirelli Scorpion Rally tires. I've ridden a couple of road bikes with similar semi-off-road tires, the kind with rows of chunky, blocky tread, and I've found that when leaning them into corners, the transition from that central row of tire tread to the next outermost row frequently results in a very unwelcome loss of confidence as the bike tips into a curve.
Yeah, the brakes, front brake doesn't exactly bite quite hard. Probably as a result of it just being a single disc, but I'm sure once we get off-road that will be an asset. There is an argument to be made that 70 to 80 horsepower is the perfect amount. It's a fun and exciting and satisfying amount of power to use, and you can use all of it. You can really wind the gears out of corners. But at the same time, it's not so much power that you have to be doing super illegal speeds just to have fun. This is a bike that I can ride at my preferred sport riding pace and not feel like much of it is going to waste.
Having neither the time nor the nerve to keep pushing it until I found the sled's limits, all I can say for certain is that this bike has an extremely fun engine and can take a paved, curvy road much better than any dual sport.
Alright, now let's see what happens with this squishy suspension on this bump here. Not much. This is about a 450-pound bike. Gonna be a little bit difficult to get airborne. Within the retro bike segment, I would say that the Triumphs are the most refined, the BMWs are the most unfiltered, and the Ducatis are somewhere in between. I can feel just enough of this engine that I won't forget what it is I'm riding, but it still feels like a completely competent package.
Next, it's time to find out if the Scrambler Desert Sled can really scramble. I had done some researching on Google Maps prior to this test ride and located a dirt road not far from the city. It was an access road for what appeared to be a public canoe ramp, but when I arrived, I found it wasn't so public after all.
Oh, I didn't realize it was a 4-H center. Hopefully I'm allowed in. The gate's open. Canoe launch. That's what I want. Looks like I'm not allowed in there. Well, that's a bummer.
All the supermoto riders yelling at me to just go for it, yeah, it probably would have been fine, but this Eagle Scout just wasn't feeling ballsy enough to trespass with two witnesses from the 4-H Center sitting right there in the truck. I tried again at what I think was a different canoe ramp access road, but no dice there either. Eventually, a bit frustrated by the lack of dirt roads within an hour's ride of DC, I settled for a couple of light intrusions into some grassy fields. While this was more of an off-road taste than an off-road test, a taste was all I needed. It was immediately clear to me that this Scrambler earns its name. The spokes, 19-inch front wheel, and long suspension travel form a solid foundation for taking the sled off pavement, but what really pushes it into proper off-roader territory is the ergonomics. A few months prior to this test ride, I attended a one-day class at DC Dirt Camp where I learned the basics of controlling a motorcycle over loose surfaces and rough terrain. Standing upright on the Desert Sled, I found that it felt surprisingly similar to the Honda CRF 230 I had ridden in class. The Ducati's high, wide handlebars give a standing rider maximum control at low speeds. The narrow saddle gives the bike plenty of room to tilt between your legs so you can always keep the outside peg weighted. Speaking of which, this is my favorite type of foot peg in all of motorcycling. The rubber pads reduce vibrations on the highway, but under your full weight, those pads squish down so that your boots press into the metal teeth below. The grip that provides is extremely confidence-inspiring when you're pitched forward to climb a hill or sticking your butt out to descend one. I may be far from an expert dirt rider, but I can tell you that the Desert Sled lends itself very well to the fundamentals of low-traction motorcycling.
So we're making our way back into the city right now, and I gotta say, I haven't really found the heat to be a problem on this bike today. Certainly not nearly as bad as the Scrambler 1100. That said, it is a cool day and we have been moving the entire time. So maybe if you were to use this as your daily commuter in a city environment, then you would find the heat to be too much. Today, though, it was no worse than anything I've experienced on my Speed Twin.
With today's Scrambler category full of street bikes pretending to be off-roaders, the Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled is the real deal, putting truly dirt-worthy equipment into a cohesive package you'll actually want to ride off-road. I'd want it to lose 150 pounds and gain 2 inches of front wheel before I'd ask it to keep up with a CRF on some single track, but it is more than adequate for casual dirt riding. Combine that with its fun retro personality and you've got one of the most interesting multi-purpose motorcycles in the middleweight class.
I want to thank you guys for watching this video today, and I once again want to thank vvoltz, the reigning MVP of this channel, for furnishing me with this motorcycle today. There's a link to his Instagram in the description below, and you should follow him if you like pictures of cool-looking bikes in front of cool-looking scenery. Let me know your thoughts on the Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled in the comments below. Until next time, you guys ride safe, and remember, motorcycles are for everyone.
Left on 301. I'm not rolling in. Whoa, what the fuck?